Our first story takes place in a small town where a group of college students decided to throw the ultimate Halloween party in an old, supposedly haunted mansion on the edge of town. The mansion had a long history of eerie happenings and was rumoured to be cursed, but that only added to its appeal for a Halloween party. The house was decorated with elaborate Halloween decorations DIY projects, and the Halloween playlist was carefully curated to include classics like the Halloween theme song and Halloween jazz from 1978. The guests arrived in their best Halloween costumes, eager to party the night away. The Halloween witch pot smoke machine mistmaker filled the room with an eerie fog, and the spooky Halloween music set the perfect tone. As the night wore on, the horror ambience began to change. What started as a lively Halloween party slowly turned into something much darker. The lights flickered and the Halloween sounds grew distorted, almost as if the music itself was trying to warn the guests. The once cheerful Halloween decorations now seemed sinister, their shadows stretching across the walls in twisted shapes. One of the students, Mark, was a fan of true scary stories and had read countless Reddit horror stories about haunted houses. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As the party continued, he noticed that a few guests had gone missing, but no one seemed to care or even notice. Then, at midnight, the Halloween soundtrack from 1978 cut off abruptly, and the room was plunged into darkness. The guests murmured in confusion, but before anyone could react, the doors slammed shut with a deafening bang. Panic set in as the Halloween partygoers realized they were trapped. Suddenly, a ghostly figure appeared in the middle of the room. It was a twisted, translucent shape, its eyes hollow and its mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. The figure floated toward the group, its presence filling the room with a bone-chilling cold. Mark tried to move, but his body was paralyzed with fear. The ghostly figure reached out with icy fingers, and the last thing he saw before everything went black was the figure's cold, dead eyes staring into his soul. The next morning, the mansion was found empty, with all traces of the Halloween party gone. The house was silent, its once festive decorations now torn and scattered. Our second story takes place at a lively Halloween party held at a popular nightclub known for its extravagant Halloween nights. The club was decked out in Halloween decorations, with spooky Halloween music playing and the Halloween Kills trailer projected onto the walls. The atmosphere was electric, with Halloween games and drinks flowing freely. One of the guests, Emily, had always been fascinated by the paranormal and had recently become obsessed with analog horror videos. She had watched countless Batman analog horror films and listened to podcast horror recaps, so she was excited for the party's rumoured disappearing act, a trick that the club had planned for midnight. As the clock struck midnight, the lights dimmed, and the Halloween green screen effects turned the room into a nightmarish landscape. The Halloween ambience was thick with tension as the DJ announced that the disappearing act was about to begin. The guests gathered around the stage, eager to see what would happen. But as the act began, something went horribly wrong. The lights flickered and the Halloween music became distorted, almost as if it was being played backward. The club's Halloween decorations seemed to come to life, their shadows twisting and writhing on the walls. The guests began to feel a sense of unease, as if something was watching them from the darkness. Then, without warning, The lights went out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, and the Halloween playlist was replaced by a low, eerie hum. The guests tried to find their way to the exits, but the doors were locked. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. Suddenly the lights flickered back on, revealing that several guests had vanished, including Emily. The remaining partygoers screamed in terror as they saw what had happened, where the missing guests had stood. There were now pools of blood and dark, ominous symbols etched into the floor. The club's staff tried to explain it as a prank gone wrong, but the truth was far more terrifying. The Halloween night event became infamous, and the club was shut down permanently. Emily and the other missing guests were never found, and the disappearing act became a legend, inspiring countless scary Reddit stories and dark web horror discussions. Our third story takes place at a Halloween party in a remote cabin in the woods. A group of friends decided to spend Halloween night there, away from the crowds and distractions of the city. The cabin was decorated with Halloween decorations, DIY projects, and the Halloween playlist included classic horror soundtracks like Halloween 2007 and Halloween 3. The guests arrived in their best Halloween costumes, ready for a night of fun and games. As the night wore on, the friends decided to play a Halloween game that one of them had heard about online. The game was called the Game of Death, and it was said to summon spirits from the other side. The rules were simple. Each person would write down their deepest fear on a piece of paper, then burn the paper in the fireplace while reciting a chant. The game was supposed to reveal the hidden terrors within the group, but no one believed it would actually work. The horror ambience in the cabin grew thicker as the game began. The Halloween witch pot smoke machine mist maker filled the room with a dense fog, and the Halloween decorations seemed to flicker in the dim light. The friends took turns burning their papers, laughing nervously as they recited the chant. But as the last paper burned, the atmosphere in the cabin changed. The Halloween sounds that had been playing in the background grew distorted, and the cabin's lights flickered ominously. The air grew cold, and the friends began to feel a sense of dread. The Halloween party was no longer fun. It was terrifying. Suddenly, the Halloween playlist stopped, and the room was plunged into silence. The friends looked around, confused and frightened, but before they could react, the cabin door burst open and a freezing wind howled through the room. The lights flickered again, and the friends saw shadows moving in the corners of their vision. One by one, the friends began to scream as their deepest fears manifested before their eyes. For some, it was spiders crawling out of the walls. For others, it was the figure of a loved one who had died years ago, now twisted and malevolent. The horror ambience was suffocating, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. The friends tried to escape, but the cabin seemed to have a mind of its own. The walls closed in, the doors slammed shut, and the windows shattered. The Halloween night became a living nightmare as the friends were hunted down by the very fears they had written on those pieces of paper. The next morning, the cabin was found empty, with no signs of the Halloween party or the friends who had attended it. The only trace of what had happened was a single piece of burnt paper in the fireplace, with the words, "Fear is the key," scrawled in ash. The Game of Death became a legend, inspiring dark web horror stories and paranormal investigations. but no one could explain the horrors that had taken place in that remote cabin. Our fourth story takes us to a Halloween party held in a historic mansion that had once been the site of a gruesome murder. The mansion had been abandoned for years, but a group of thrill-seekers decided to rent it out for a Halloween night party, hoping to experience the paranormal activity that was rumoured to haunt the place. The mansion was decorated with Halloween decorations, DIY projects, and the Halloween playlist was filled with eerie Halloween chiptune and spooky Halloween music. The guests arrived in their best Halloween costumes, excited for a night of thrills and chills. The Halloween ambience was perfect, with the Halloween witch pot smoke machine mist maker creating an eerie fog that filled the room. As the night wore on, the guests began to explore the mansion, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghost that was said to haunt the place. One of the guests, Rachel, was a fan of ghost adventures and had been looking forward to the party for weeks. She had read about the mansion's dark history in scary Reddit stories and was eager to see if the rumors were true. But as the guests explored the mansion, the Halloween night took a sinister turn. The Halloween decorations seemed to move on their own, and the Halloween playlist grew distorted, almost as if the music was being twisted by some unseen force. The air grew colder, and the guests began to feel a sense of dread. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the Halloween playlist stopped. The mansion was plunged into darkness, and the guests were left in silence. Then, from the shadows, a low, guttural whisper echoed through the room. The guests froze, their hearts pounding as they realized they were not alone. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, and the guests began to see shadows moving in the corners of their vision. The Halloween night had become a nightmare as the ghost of the mansion's past victims returned to seek revenge on those who had disturbed their resting place. One by one, the guests were hunted down by the vengeful spirits. The once lively Halloween party turned into a bloodbath as the spirits exacted their revenge, dragging the guests into the depths of despair. The mansion's walls were stained with blood, and the air was thick with the stench of death. The next morning, the mansion was found empty, with no signs of the Halloween party or the guests who had attended it. The mansion was sealed off, and it became the subject of countless dark web horror stories and paranormal investigations. The Halloween revenge was complete, and the mansion remains a place of fear and darkness to this day. Our final story takes place at a high-stakes Halloween party held at a luxurious mansion in the heart of the city. The party was an exclusive event, attended by the rich and powerful, and was known for its elaborate Halloween decorations, extravagant Halloween costumes, and high-stakes games. The Halloween playlist was filled with haunting Halloween lofi and Halloween ASMR, creating a spooky atmosphere that perfectly matched the opulent surroundings. The Halloween decorations were top-notch, with Halloween green screen effects and a Halloween witch pot smoke machine mist maker adding to the eerie ambience. As the night wore on, the guests were invited to participate in a game known as the Halloween Gambit. The rules were simple. Each participant would be given a card with a Halloween theme, and they would have to perform a task related to the card. The tasks ranged from harmless pranks to dangerous dares, but the rewards were worth the risk. One of the guests, Daniel, was a fan of dark web horror stories and was eager to participate in the game. He had read about the Halloween Gambit in scary Reddit stories and was determined to win. As the game began, the Halloween night took on a darker tone. The Halloween sounds grew distorted, and the Halloween decorations seemed to take on a life of their own. The tasks became more dangerous and the stakes grew higher. The Halloween ambience was thick with tension, and the air was heavy with a sense of impending doom. Suddenly the Halloween playlist stopped, and the room was plunged into silence. The Halloween Gambit had taken a sinister turn, and the guests began to realize that the game was not what it seemed. The tasks became deadly, and the mansion itself seemed to be working against them. Daniel's task was simple: find the hidden key that would unlock the door to the mansion's secret room. But as he searched the dark, twisting corridors, he began to feel a sense of dread. The Halloween decorations seemed to move on their own, and the shadows stretched and twisted in the dim light. As Daniel reached the end of the corridor, he found the key, but it was guarded by a shadowy figure with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. The figure reached out with cold, bony hands, and the last thing Daniel saw before everything went black was the figure's malevolent grin. The next morning, the mansion was found empty, with no signs of the Halloween party or the guests who had attended it. The Halloween Gambit was over, and the mansion was sealed off. The event became the subject of countless dark web horror stories and paranormal investigations.